We've done the welcome. The format for this morning is I'm just going to chat to you about some notions of resilience, and then it's going to be very interactive. So we'll break out into breakout sessions and have conversations, and then come back and feedback to the rest of the group. So I'd love it if everyone, when we're talking to each other, to have your cameras on and really connect with each other so that we can have really good conversations, because that's what these OD talks are about. It's talking about all things OD and building a community of practice that we can connect to and share ideas with. So we're going to start off with a bit of a video. And this is a cinematic take on 2020 so far, and it's as of August. So here we are, just to rattle everyone's cage first thing.
It's like the apocalypse. It's that bad.
Last day of the decade must have seemed like the end of days.
Iran's general, Qasem Soleimani. He'd reportedly just gotten into Iraq from Beirut and was leaving Baghdad airport when he was killed in a convoy of vehicles along with a top Iraqi militia leader.
But we caught him in the act and terminated him.
Good evening. The world is on edge tonight after Iran made good on its promise, launching a revenge attack on the United States following the death of its top military leader.
A Ukrainian plane carrying 176 people was crashed shortly after taking off from the Iranian capital, Tehran.
Prince Harry and Meghan saying they're stepping back from royal duties.
The impeachment trial of President Trump begins.
In Turkey, where at least 22 people are now dead and more than 900 injured after an earthquake in the east of the country.
The tragic death of NBA legend Kobe Bryant.
A man who could score 81 points in a single game.
81 So there it is. The UK has left the European Union. 47 years of history brought to an end in the name of sovereignty and independence.
From flames to flash floods.
I will not be running for president in 2020.
Senator Bernie Sanders has just announced that he is suspending his campaign. He is dropping out of the race for president. Joe Biden is now the presumptive Democratic nominee against President Donald Trump.
Coronavirus.
COVID-19.
Tom Hanks announcing overnight that he and wife Rita Wilson are both infected.
The Chinese whistleblower doctor who told the world about the coronavirus in Wuhan has died.
All of Italy is going on lockdown.
Countries such as Italy and Iran are in the middle of the battle. Elsewhere, the impact of COVID-19 is just beginning.
The World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
All this has rocked financial markets around the world. The worst sell-off on Wall Street since the financial crisis in 2008.
The European Championships this summer will be postponed until 2021.
The 2020 Summer Olympics, now the latest major sports cancellation caused by the global COVID-19 pandemic.
The U.S. now has the highest number of COVID-19 related deaths in the world.
Learned about the rapid escalation of coronavirus as global infections surpass 1 million.
Is it just me? Or is it getting crazy out there?
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena. Videos which add fuel to the belief of some we are not alone.
A massacre in the honeycomb.
Breaking news, a passenger plane crashing in Pakistan.
The second outbreak of Ebola has been confirmed.
An online collective group by the name Anonymous has surged once again.
Minneapolis on fire.
This is getting serious. Oh my goodness.
We got a little bit of a fire breaking out to the left here. Tantalizing.
Fires have been started.
Things got out of control.
We're marching peacefully and chanting names.
It'll get worse before it gets better.
Now, 13 years after she vanished, prosecutors in Germany say they believe Madeleine McCann is dead.
A devastating, earth-altering 7.1 magnitude quake Tuesday across the Rio Grande in Mexico City.
The rising tension between India and China along the line of control is now the biggest face-off between the two sides since the Doklam crisis in 2017.
Democracy activists say they fear the end of Hong Kong after China announced plans for new security laws.
Hurricane Hannah slamming into the Texas shore, winds of 90 miles an hour.
And the pandemic continues to spread across the world. Data compiled by the statistics website Worldometer shows global infections surpassed 10 million.
Just after 6 p.m. local time on Tuesday, the 4th of August, an explosion ripped through Beirut's port.
What a clip, hey? So 2020 has been rough, and that's just as of August. Lots more has happened, and we wonder why we're feeling so shattered. I was saying to Richard this morning, he says, he's feeling heavy and lackluster, no energy, and I said, dude, it's been a rough year. I wouldn't overthink it. I think the world is feeling completely and utterly drained of energy. And generally, this time of year, without a global pandemic and all of the things that have been happening, people are generally tired. So I thought I would take an existential psychological view of what happens to us in crisis. So people tend to lose perspective. So crisis closes down our perspective. Under the best circumstances, members of organizations tend to labor under a more or less restricted view of their world. The disruptive and overwhelming nature of a significant crisis leads to a further and drastic loss of perspective. So the world no longer makes sense to us. And when we have a tendency to hark back into more limited perspectives that used to serve us more or less satisfactorily in the past, where we thought we knew the world. This kind of perspective nostalgia and it limits our capacity to experience our world by reducing and distorting what we allow as our reality. Interestingly enough, we designed quite an elegant solution for organizational resilience. And one of the interventions around losing perspective is enabling members to see their perspective limits and how it limits their experience so that they become more open to the development of a more realistic perspective, thereby altering their experience of their situation. So the ability to shift one's perspective or zoom out to gain multiple perspectives allows for better thinking and opens up alternative opportunities to solve problems. We also tend to lose orientation. So by this, we broadly mean that our attitude towards what we are facing and this is often more informed by unconscious rather than conscious emotional reactions to our world. Our emotional reaction and the resultant attitude affects both our capacity for getting perspective and for effective action. The trouble with emotions is that we experience them as murky waters, so we try not to dive down there too much. Our typical reaction to issues of attitude often entails pop militaristic or pop psychological exhortations that deny the validity of our actual but unwelcomed emotions, with the result that the actual emotional experience remains hidden. This means that we do not gain access to different possibilities of emotional experience, where we either narrowly focused on what we are repressing or where we are narrowly focused on wishful thinking. I saw it play out quite a lot in some organizations at the beginning of lockdown. It was either panic or wishful thinking that it was going to be over by, you know, the first 3 weeks. So an effective intervention will be to implicitly or explicitly develop the emotional maturity of the members of the organization so that an authentic orientation may develop that is rooted in a more real and inclusive experience of reality. Action. So crisis stuns us, and perversely it stuns us both into inertia or freeze or into frenzy, fight or flight. People often fall back into their worst behavioral patterns, passivity, aggression, disengaging and avoiding conflict, and being control freaks, etc. The lack of positive results from these behaviors leads us only to increase them, as if more of what doesn't work would somehow magically start to work. So in reaction to crisis, we often want to specify and prescribe certain behaviors, and we almost always fail because we have not altered our experience, and therefore we act out of and in ways that only confirm our current limited experience. So an effective intervention will be to create space for a more critical awareness of our habitual reactions, thereby allowing for the possibility of more conscious responses to become available to us. So does anyone notice that these things have happened to them or seen it happen to their colleagues or organizations in general? Are you all still there?
Yes.
I'm talking to my screen and I can't see anyone. Okay, cool. Well, let's go into the definitions we have of resilience. So I thought the notion of resilience, the notion that we have of resilience may not be serving us anymore. And I took some definitions off the web. So what do we notice here? So one of the definitions is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or creating toughness, or the ability of a substance or an object to spring back into shape, which is elasticity. From a psychological resilience perspective, psychological resilience is the ability to mentally or emotionally cope with a crisis or return to a pre-crisis status quickly. So resilience exists when the person uses mental processes and behaviors in promoting personal assets and protecting self from the potential negative effects of stresses. And one of the OD talks we had in July with Dr. Dave Wilkinson, he spoke of the importance of emotional intelligence. And one of the things that he brought up as well is that people constantly try and return to a state before the crisis or the trauma, as opposed to working forward. So I'm going to break us up into breakout rooms and I would like us to chat about. So would the notion or concept of resilience be different to you if we were to stop trying to return to a state before the crisis? So how would it be different if you think it would be different? And we'll chat with each other for about 10 minutes and then feed back to the larger group. Let me break us out into some breakout rooms. I'm going to stop sharing for now. 15. So let's make 3 breakout rooms. And there'll be 5 of you in a room. And each of you just chat to each other about, so what would the notion or the concept of resilience be if we had to stop trying to return to the point before crisis? And you can choose someone from your breakout room to represent the feedback to the rest of us. Okay. And I will bring you back in about 10 minutes. Okay. Rooms. You'll get a notification to enter a room, just accept, and then have a good chat. Oh, are we all back?
Yeah.
So how was the conversation? Do you guys mind if I call you out per breakout room? Just because I can see the list, it helps me. It helps me cope.
I'm so sorry, just from my side. I was still talking and then we were coming back into the session. That was a very quick 10 minutes, eh?
Okay.
Sorry about that, colleagues.
No. Breakout room 1 with Cindy, Gordon, Jabulile, and Neville. How was the conversation? What were some of the conclusions that you came to?
We didn't actually appoint a spokesperson, but maybe I can just kick off and sort of give my perspective, and then perhaps Gordon and Cindy can give their perspectives as well. And unfortunately, we didn't hear from Jabulile because we kind of ran out of time. But I think the point that I wanted to make, Roy, was that, you know, in our normal conceptualization of resilience after a crisis, we often think of a crisis as a single event that happens. And I think the sense that I got from watching the video was, you know, that we have had repeated crises, that it's been 9 months of various crises. And, you know, while many of those crises other than COVID were sort of at a global or international level, each one of us personally in our own lives, in our families, in our communities, in our work situations, have experienced crises consequent to the COVID crisis, or perhaps even unrelated to COVID. So for me, you know, it just made me think about, is our normal way we think about resilience still appropriate when you have enduring, repeated, compound, complex crises, rather than just a one-off thing that you're trying to recover from and react to? But there were other perspectives, and maybe Gordon and Cindy, you want to quickly just jump in and give your views as well as Jabulile.
I think you can go ahead.
Thanks, Gordon. No, I'm so sorry. I really need to keep it short. But I think really for me, it's you know, for me it's an individual. It starts with the individual and it starts at the personal level. And I think, you know, we all get into that space where we start having conversations, you know, with ourselves, just to try and answer the question that you posed to us this morning, Roy. You know. Then I think we can move forward. And sometimes we remain behind and we think about what was and how we can get back to what was, not understanding and realizing, you know, about this huge possibility that it will never be again, and that the future looks very, very different. And if we all just get to that point where we start having, you know, conversations with ourselves about equipping ourselves so that we can deal with the constant change that we face with, and also understand that it's constant. You know, and resilience is not something that we can pull out of a bag somewhere and use it quickly and put it back again. I think we are living in a world currently where we have to use it every day. And the only way for us to be ready every day is to deal with every day as it comes. Take out the tools that we can, sharpen our tools, sharpen our source, you know, learn more, get greater perspective, grow more, you know, and get ourselves ready for the future that is very unknown at this point in time. I think a lot of us think we know what to expect, but we don't. You know, and even that makes it almost unsafe, almost not knowing what's coming, and not being sure that you are actually ready to deal with what's coming. So for me, it's really about just, you know, in the moment, doing what we need to do to position ourselves, you know, almost like putting on armor, looking at different things and, you know, different perspectives, and putting our tools in our box to help us to be ready to deal with this unknown future. But to be honest, I don't think we will ever go back to what was. And that is quite frightening.
Yeah, it's almost like a constant traumatization, and resilience is in the now, not in the future or the past. Gordon?
Thanks, Indy. From my side, Roy, I think as COVID being a prolonged thingy, not knowing whether it's going to end anytime soon, and with all those stuff happening on that video, adding to the stress and the depression and all things changing around the world, it makes it more difficult for most of us to quite strike resilience in that way. So from my side, I think adaptation, because we have no idea when COVID is going to end, have a clue. I think adaptation to the new norm of working, the new norm of operating might be a great thing that can pull us through. You understand? Yeah, basically, mostly from the workplace. That might assist greatly from a family perspective, from a work perspective. Adaptation is the most, if I can pin it in that way, a huge advantage that can act in our part in managing this whole crisis thingy. Yeah.
Jabilile, did you want to add anything more, seeing as though you guys ran out of time?
I'm going to try and sum it up, Roy, is that definitely I wouldn't want to go back to the way what it was. I think the whole season has given awesome opportunities, and from almost all areas. I think in the beginning, because we did not know, you know, in terms of how it's going to unfold, it brought a lot of uncertainties. And I think from most areas, and when I say most areas, I'll speak to career perspective, personally and family, is that it brought opportunities in terms of reflecting and really repositioning one to saying, or refocusing one into where to from here, and take life even more, I don't want to say more seriously, but you know, be intentional about what you do and everything that you do. And because of the opportunities that some of us have leveraged off, I wouldn't want to go back, but just to go to the future and say, how do we take the lessons learned and the opportunities that still present themselves and move forward to really.
It's almost back to that perspective. You've mentioned a lot of positive things, the opportunities to look at life, and if what I was hearing was correct, appreciate and be more intentional about what you're doing. So that speaks quite significantly to perspective, and that's a great perspective to have. Thank you, Java.
You're welcome.
Room 2 with Farina, Laura, and Richard. How was your chat?
I can do my best to try and summing up what we said. Yeah, we also felt like time passed very quickly. There was a sense that there are still people thinking things are going back to normal. Farina made a lovely statement, which I wrote down. She said, waiting for the normal to come. It's kind of a lot of people are just sitting back and going, okay, whatever the new normal is going to be, we'll wait for it to arrive. And I thought that was quite an interesting perspective. There was also talk of specifically in South Africa, the lockdown was an added challenge because we're generally a little bit behind the rest of the world in how we run businesses and how we manage people within them. You know, we are slightly more old school where we want to control people. And maybe a good lesson we can learn from this crisis is, okay, we didn't want to let people work from home, but actually we can maybe. And on a personal note, also just taking in what people have said now, I do believe we're all sitting in a space where we don't know what or when whatever is coming is going to come. We're sitting in the space of not knowing. And I think we need to find some resilience in that space. Not trying to fix not knowing, but trying to allow ourselves to be in the not knowing space. Because without that, we will all lose our minds.
Yeah, if some of us haven't already. Yeah, you were speaking about being where we are, and that's the orientation piece that we chatted about earlier. Being able to know where you are so that you can see where to possibly go. There's this one tribe somewhere in Africa, and I'm not going to give very many details because I can't remember the details too much, but they're known for being very, very good navigators. So you know, their tribe lives in vast open spaces, and the way in which they always orient themselves is it's built into their language. So they would say, my leg is southwest, you know, and they never get lost in the desert, you know. It's orientation is one of the key things that enable us to move forward, is to know where you are now. So I think it's a great insight for room 2. Anyone else from room 2 want to pipe up or add to what Richard said?
No, I think Richard summed it up quite nicely. But a big part of where we're going to is the lack of trust in South Africa, and that needs to change. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck where we are.
Indeed. And you've had quite an interesting morning, Laura. I don't know if you want to share with the group what's building your resilience today.
Our entire office got flooded by the bathroom. So I'm hiding in an office upstairs. We're knee deep in water. Yeah, it's good fun.
2020 keeps on giving, hey. Well, thank you for joining us and wearing a smile. Awesome. Room 3 with Audrey, Carol, Michael, Sarah, and VM1. How was your conversation?
I'll jump in here, Roy, if I can. I've got 4 points. One is personal, and 3 is what the group discussed. And then if the group's okay with that, they can jump in if I've completely misunderstood or miscribed what we discussed. The first point is a personal one, is that I don't think my interpretation of the question was COVID specific. So further to Neville's point, there's many crises. We've been dealing with these things for 2,000 years. I think perhaps technology has just accentuated COVID because of the time we're in, and probably made us more aware of, crises. So that's a personal note. And then from the group's perspective, one of the points that came up was that the impact or the cause of the crisis, or your perceived experience of that cause, will influence how you approach resilience. Done to you, done by you, done, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a point that was spoken about. And the second point was that this notion of going back to normal came up, and it was sort of criticized, and moving forward was felt to be more appropriate to some kind of new normal. And that immediately led to a question, so what is normal? So we've come back, I think, with more questions, and open it to the rest of the group if I've misled or left out anything.
I think he's covered it all.
Thanks, Michael. I think you got us all quite nicely succinct and specific.
Michael, the master narrator. And as any good OD conversation, coming out with more questions. So good luck to the rest of your day and that thinking. So just to summarize, I think what we've all agreed to some level and to some extreme of that level, that resilience is not going back to the state before crisis. To sort of summarize, it's more about being here, about your perspective, about figuring out how to move forward. So if those if those are the notions of what resilience means to us now, then our definitions of resilience no longer serve us. So if that is the question, then how do we build resilience at an individual or team or organizational level? So I'm just going to share my screen a bit, because I have 1 or 2 more slides. I promise not to murder you by PowerPoint. Please hold while we process your request. And I'm not going to go full screen so that I can see you all. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a bit small, so I'm going to have to go full screen. Okay, so we know that these types of things built resilience and enabled resilience at an individual level. So at an individual level, if I'm mentally, physically, and socially healthy, I'm better able to respond to crises or constant traumatization. Or if I have sense-making tools that allow me to orient myself or shift my perspective, or I work at building emotional intelligence, like Michael was saying, done to me, by me, or the side of me, and resources, obviously, time, money, energy, etc. And at a team level, building trust or having a social currency or a clear purpose and mandate. So having that North Star, or being able to effectively and non-violently communicate. So you reduce the friction, you reduce the unnecessary trauma. So you dial down the level of I like the term static, you know, that noise. Or building team EQ or team intelligence. So knowing where your team is at as individuals. So Laura is having a really rough day, so I would forgive any outbursts, as an example, if we were on a team. At an organizational level, having Slack, so having spare resources available to adjust to shifting contexts. Slack is also a notion that enables organizational innovation or authentic servant leadership. So currently, servant leadership, specifically in the agile space, is, you know, transparent, open communication and enabling support is the leadership style that enables agility. And agility is one of the aspects of organizational resilience, the ability to be nimble, to respond to shifting contexts. Great relationships with your value chains. So an organization has a value chain with logistics and, you know, various other service providers. That good relationship enables the organization to renegotiate on terms or contracts, which then creates a little bit of space. And then finally, great real relationships with your customers. So a lot of organizations in the customer-centric or customer-focused space has a clean and clear line of communication with their customers. And it's been shown that customers are a lot more forgiving when there's that good real relationship. So organizational mistakes are forgiven. So these are some of the things that we know at an individual, team, or organizational level builds resilience. But do we think that it still holds true? Based on the conversation from the breakout rooms, what would you say are new ways to build resilience at an individual or team or organizational level? And feel free to drop it in the chat, or we'll just for a couple of minutes take some thoughts from everyone. And we'll do this popcorn style. So if you want to chat, just unmute yourself and turn your camera on and share your thoughts with us. And go. So in the chat, Laura says, why do we need to define normal at all? Is that not what gets us stuck? Yeah, indeed. Michael agrees. For him, defining normal is counterintuitive to agility and probably stifles our ability to deal with change. Please excuse me if I'm making funny faces when I'm reading. I lost my reading glasses, so it's the only way I can see.
I thought it was my word choice. I thought I was in trouble there for a minute.
No, this is the Roy can't read face.
Roy, it's Neville. Michael mentioned, 2,000 years of change. And in a way, if we think back to our OD principles of change management and the tendency to want to go back to the way things were. And, obviously, depending on your model or paradigm of change and how we as OD practitioners help people through change, that change curve of, resisting the tendency to sort of revert back to the way things were and to kind of keep an eye on the future vision and what we're aiming for and why we're doing this and why we can't do it in the old way. I guess, a lot of those principles from change management inform the way we try to build resilience. You go through that change curve many, many times and hope that, if you do it well and you learn from the way you do it, that you can in fact build resilience for a new future in that way. I don't know if anybody else has been struck by the parallels between building resilience and, you know, dealing with change management.
Yeah, even if you look at I think it's Sharma's You, going through that dip to create sustainable change, and if you experience that dip at the bottom of the U as a trauma that you have to deal with to let go and to enable change to happen, I think there are quite significant parallels. And some of the things that I'm hearing from the comments is that some things do serve us still and some things do not. So we may not need to throw out our entire this was our toolbox, it no longer serves us. So navigating complex change might be a good tool to enable organizations to shift to a more stable footing, therefore enabling resilience. Thanks for that, Neville. Cool. I have one more slide for you all, and that is a breakaway room. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see Bruce Lee? I can't see your heads nodding. Someone just say yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I love this quote from Bruce Lee, and I thought it was quite appropriate to the notion of resilience. And it says, don't get set into one form, adapt it and build your own and let it grow. Be like water. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup and it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it into a teacup and it becomes the teacup, the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be like water, my friend. And he was, he often threw out anecdotes for life. And I think that might be quite a nice way to think about resilience, is to reshape and reform as opposed to fight against. So I'm going to break you out into breakout rooms. And in the context of our conversation, what is resilience now? I'd like you to chat about, if you have observed examples of resilience recently, what stood out for you? What I mean by that is a person might have had a major tragedy, and they're still able to show up, be present, and contribute in the office environment, amidst this shit show that we've been going through in 2020. And to discover that that person may have just the most awesome or amazing support network. So that's what I mean by what stood out for you. If you could think about why this resilience, why this example of resilience, and then, chat about what the absence of it looked like. So I'm going to start breakout rooms randomly now. I hope you get to talk to new people, and I will bring you back in about 10 minutes or so. I will broadcast the questions to you all. So happy chatting. Jabilile has to run and Cindy has to run. Back. How were your conversations? I know room 2 had Laura drop out. Her day is getting better. They've had power failure. So she's knee deep in water and no power. So she sends apologies.
Yeah, she vanished just like that, was just gone.
Yeah. So how was the conversation, room one? Gwen, Neville, Gordon?
From our side, Roy, we gave different examples from a personal and organizational perspective. So in a nutshell, firstly, it comes from our leaders in organizations having that mentality or a sense of support to their employees, given the fact of being able to be flexible in your work environment, in codes at your workplace, being able to take care of your kids and yourself and your productivity, and them being able to make communication viable, because communication is key in most senses. Having a general understanding of what's happening in an organization, on your team, your productivity, the status, and from my side, I try to put it in an analogy of technology, having technology back us up, because before, some of the organizations weren't able to work from home, but COVID pushed us to be able to work from home. So having that technology being a vital element in making us work or be productive. Sorry about that. Yeah, making us be productive and flexible at our own space. Yeah, I think, yeah, I can put it that way, just to put it in a nutshell. I don't know, Gwen, if you can just edit from your side.
What I was saying is that resilience is a point of looking at things from a point of view, knowing that things change, and accepting the fact that you are where you're supposed to be at any point in time. So in my personal experience, faith has always pulled me through to accepting what happens and looking at the fact that it's God's will and God does everything in His time. So I do believe that a lot of companies, if you look at what they do, it's not always the company, it's the manager concerned. And it's whether that person is a manager or a leader, like we said before. Managers want to see what their people are doing all the time, and they want to micromanage everything they're doing. Leaders trust that their people are doing what they should be doing when they're supposed to be doing it, and follow that route. And if you're not a follower or whatever, you need a stronger leader. So we always blame organizations, but sometimes it's not the organization, it's the manager, the individual manager in that organization that's a problem.
So you would say, to be more resilient in that manager direct report relationship, there would be a need for a relationship building type exercise, or an intervention around the softer elements to sort of reduce that friction that I was talking about earlier.
Effectively, yes. And that manager needs to understand that the way he is in his space is not the same way everybody else perceives it to be in their space.
So that's an example of where you've seen resilience fail, is that manager reverting back to old behavior or bad behavioral patterns, misbehaving effectively.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else from room one want to add before we move to room two?
I think I covered Neville. Okay.
Good. Okay, cool. Room two, Keenan and Richard. Laura said, Richard, you can feedback for her.
Yes, well, it was quite interesting. We had both ends of the spectrum. Laura spoke about how they in manufacturing, so they've worked throughout because of the nature of the work, and she's seen resilience in the fact that people are working together at work. They're communicating with each other, and it's become a support space for people that have had very challenging times with people dying in their family from COVID or unrelated or other related issues. People that are in highly stressful situations finding that the workspace is a kind of a neutral space where they found that resilience. We also spoke about how, and that resilience comes from the fact that they are still at work in the same workspace, and how a workspace like that sort of has a community where resilience can be built. On the opposite end, a lot of people have been sent home to work on Zoom, basically, and how that has isolated a lot of people. And if the right measures weren't put in place to allow proper communication channels, it becomes a very isolated and confusing space for people, where they're not able to know whether they're doing the right things, whether how their actions are going to be judged. You lose the subtlety of being at the office, where you have those little small conversations that give you a much broader picture of what's going on. And when you isolated at home, you're a lot more isolated. And especially coupled with sort of an old school business, you know, I'm the boss and you do what I tell you kind of attitude. It's almost impossible to manage in that space. And communication becomes very limited. And it brings fear in for those people, because they don't know how their actions are going to be judged. They don't know how their performance is going to be judged. And they kind of sit in a very dark space that's very unclear. So yeah, those were the kind of two examples. On our space, and Roy could speak to this too, is at the start of lockdown, we initiated two things. One was a open space for all our clients, anyone we connected with, to have a conversation. And those conversations weren't necessarily work related. It was just an open space where we could talk. And I think that helped build a lot of resilience with the people that partook in it. And we've also had a daily meeting internally that's very open, and where we share our emotions or feelings or fears, and it's allowed us to better understand our colleagues and build resilience within our team to go, okay, Roy's having a rough day, how can we support Roy? And to manage the team energy better because of that.
Yeah, the things that I'm hearing, Richard, is if I had to identify an underlying theme between where you've observed resilience and the lack of resilience, is that of connection. Either being connected or belonging to something builds resilience, and the antithesis of that, being isolated and at home, stuck to a screen, no connection, sort of breaks down that resilience, because there's a disconnection, there's a loneliness, or I'm in this on my own. Yeah, I think community, and just to reiterate Richard's point with the daily OD check-ins, we formed a community, and I think for some that's going to be friends for a long time to come. And it did for me personally help through some of the rough parts in lockdown. So yeah, community is and connection, I think, is very important. That's coming out of your conversation. Thank you, Richard. Keenan, anything you want to add to that?
Roy, Richard basically covered everything that I was going to say. It's just been a bit frustrating on my side. Just one more point to add on there. It's been a bit frustrating knowing that you have to deal with the new way of work, and it's going to be like this for a while. What frustrates me a bit more is the fact that you're going through so much with all of this, with everything that's happening right now, and there is no structure. So you're basically just being left there in your corner, and you're expected to do stuff, but there is no structure in place for you to do what is expected of you to do. So that's it's just the last point I wanted to add to that. But Richard basically covered everything.
Yeah, thanks, Keenan. The lack of structure or routine that adds complexity, you know.
If there was structure, at least you're waking up and you need to do A, B, and C. Now, in most cases, it's not like that, and that is a bit frustrating.
I hear you. Thank you, Keenan. So room 3, Audrey, Michael, Sarah, how was your conversation? And the last feedback from here, we'll go to, if we have time, so what now? Who wants to go from room 3?
I'm happy to, but I'm not going to leap up. I don't want to. So.
You're our masterful narrator, Michael. We're happy to pass the buck.
Get you everywhere. Okay, so yes, there were examples given from my side, a company, and Sarah spoke, of positive experiences in resilience, and Sarah spoke about the children, Audrey about a particular person, and we kind of started talking along the lines, it was quite easy to spot positive signs of resilience. We weren't entirely sure why, though, people are resilient. We just, we had kind of settled on some notion that it's a belief in the ability to cope more than anything else. And then we started talking a little bit about the absence in the question, and the absence of resilience. And the feeling was that the question was a bit dichotomous, and absence perhaps not, and that it was a difference of degree rather than type, and probably everyone's resilient to a certain extent. And then we got onto a conversation about the difference between resilience and adaptation. And where does the one stop when the other one start? Are they on the same continuum? What is the one? Is resilience about growth? Is there a growth connotation when you talk about resilience? Is there a status quo connotation when you talk about adaptation? Again, more questions than answers.
You're welcome. Okay. Audrey, Sarah, any last thoughts, or has the master narrator nailed it once more?
I don't think I've got much more to add to that. I think he's covered it all. It's just that God has blessed every human being with the ability to be able to adapt. And from the adaptation, we can eventually work on resilience, or work resilience, which is sort of like the stronger adaptation. I just feel that resilience is like the stronger adaptation. And after you've worked out a plan for yourself, adaptation is just going with the flow every day. But resilience is once you get belief in yourself, and then work out a plan for yourself, work out a survival plan, and then work the plan.
Yeah. So belief, faith is where a lot of people I know find great resilience. Yeah. Thanks for that, Sarah. Gwen says, I always used to say that when you have nothing to do, you need to do it in the office. When you are isolated, you cannot really walk over to a colleague and offer to assist them. And then she sends her Cheerios she needs to drop off. Okay, so Audrey, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to add something?
No, not at all. I was just, going to thank Michael for being that masterful narrator, but also just to say we were heading to that place in our conversation about the importance of believing we can be resilient and having that faith in ourselves, and how do we cultivate that in ourselves and in others to make sure that, and maybe that's where you're going to now with the so what next?
Yeah, thanks for the intro into that, Audrey. So what now? We've looked at the traditional notion of resilience, and whether it still serves us, and resilience being, can we rethink about it in a way that enables us to weather this constant traumatization? Michael, for the past 2,000 years, I love your sense of humor. It's just sped up quite significantly. So with these questions that's come out of the conversation, what are some of the things we can do at an individual level, and at a team level, and at an organizational level, to start building resilience and perhaps shift us forward? Yeah, if anyone wants to have those conversations with us, where we can help think through those types of questions for yourselves, your teams, and your businesses or your organizations, please do give us a shout. But I thought we could perhaps end off on what was the aha moment for each of you. What is the one thing, like Audrey was saying, is the belief that you can be resilient? Maybe that is the so what now for now. What is the one aha moment? Okay, so we're at 10:30, so that's strictly our time. But those who would like to stay and share that, I'd love to hear from you. But maybe that's the question, as we formally close the conversation, to take into the rest of the day. What insight did this conversation bring, and what might you do differently by a different understanding or a different perspective of resilience, to be more resilient either on your own or within your team, or help your organization? So I think we'll close off on that question and start the recording. And those who would like to stay and chat and share the aha moments, please do. Thank you everyone for a very cool conversation. I've really enjoyed having you all with us and sharing your thoughts and your opinions with us. And I hope to see you all again sometime soon with one of our next OD talks, or even face-to-face when we're all comfortable to do that. So thank you everyone for a wonderful session.